Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy new background, right? And so this episode of LinkedIn Live is brought to you by a very special guest and a very special message. But before we go into that, I just want to ask, I put this question in the chat, but I'm going to ask it to you directly. How do you feel about the age you are? So just to kind of make this, an even playing field. I'm 58 years old and I freaking love my age. I don't know why. I've always loved my age, no matter which one it is. I could care less about a number, but I care more about what age really means. The woman that you're about to meet is a rock star, also the author of This Chair Rocks, TED Talk speaker, Glennon Doyle guest, and she has been studying age and an ageist activist to tell us some myths that we've all been believing about age. And without further ado, Ashton Applegate, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in from Brooklyn, one of my favorite places ever, to really set us straight about age. And I have to ask you, like, what sparked your fascination and interest in learning about age? How did you become an ageist activist?
Ageism. I hope I'm not
Ageism.
ageist, but everyone's
Oh,
ageist. So,
ageism.
everyone is ageist. We all are full of bias. We can't escape it, especially in a culture that barrages us with negative messages about how awful it's all going to be. I hit my mid 50s. I'm 70. And I realized how apprehensive I was about getting older. So I started researching longevity and realized in about 30 seconds, literally in a matter of months, if not weeks, how much of what I thought I knew lay ahead was way off base or flat out wrong. And, if you had told me 15 years ago that I would be fascinated with aging, I would have said, why do I want to think about something scary and yucky and icky? And aging is not something sad that old people do. It is how we move through life. For a generalist like me, it is just endlessly fascinating. I mean, I am a political person, so what I am interested in is I am not an expert in aging, the biology of aging, but I am an expert in the social and political context in which we age that makes it so much harder than it has to be, especially for
Excellent.
women.
So I know you have some stats at the top of your head, and I would love for you to share some of the myths and
Yeah.
the bullshit about what we think happens to us when we get older and what the truth is about what happens when we get older with respect to things like dementia or
Yeah.
being in a care facility.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say from an overarching perspective, the way each of us does this is unique. I am not 70 the way anyone else is 70. You are not 58 the way anyone else is 58. So there's no one truth of what it's going to be like to encounter XYZ. You may encounter it and another person your age won't. There's luck. We tend to overlook the role of luck in all of this. But I thought entering into this that the odds of ending up in a care facility were pretty darn good. It turns out when I started researching this, now I'm talking about nursing homes, not all senior residences. The percentage of Americans over 65 in nursing homes at that time was 4.5%. It's dropped to 2%.
2%.
Yeah, 2%. The number of people getting Alzheimer's has dropped considerably. There are more people with Alzheimer's because age is the biggest risk factor, but the odds of you or I or anyone listening being diagnosed with it have gotten lower and lower, and people are being diagnosed at later ages. It is not that the scary stuff isn't real. You're not going to catch me saying, oh, it'll never happen to you. It might. There are things you can do that probably help prevent it, but there's no guarantees. This is very American, very male idea that if I eat enough kale or think the right thoughts or have the right attitude, I can control my aging. No, you can't. So if you can let go of that delusion, and learn about all the things you can do to age well, you will certainly affect how well you age. But one thing you can control is how much you know about age and aging, and how many of the stereotypes and myths are without basis, and that the fear of our, our larger than life fears, they are bad for our health. They make us more vulnerable to exactly what we fear. And you don't have to be afraid of things that are not reasonable to be afraid of.
So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road for me. And you mentioned this on some of your previous podcasts, and you talk about it openly, that the fear of our aging and how we manifest that can also contribute to the very thing that we want to prevent.
Yeah, it's not a paradox, it's causal. And I mean, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out that most of what we worry about when it comes to getting older, and again, the fear is legit, is the way our minds and bodies might change as we move through life. That's not actually ageism. It's ableism, which is prejudice and stigma around ability, cognitive and physical ability, right? Some people are born with disabilities. Plenty of people age. We don't age without some loss of physical function, but lots of people stay sharp to the end. So it's not actually about age. Most of the research about the very mounting body of blue chip research about how attitudes towards aging affect how our minds and bodies function is done by Becca Levy at Yale. And my favorite, the study that I love to mention, is one she did that shows that people with more, I don't say more positive attitudes towards aging. That's how she says it. But to me, that sounds a little like gray washy. I say people with more accurate understandings of ageism are less likely to get Alzheimer's, even if they have the gene that predisposes them to the disease. The idea is that this more positive attitude acts as a buffer against the stress and the messages from the culture that say that if you can't find where you put your coffee cup, you won't remember your name by Thursday, because that's not the way it works. And I have to say, Becca just published a fantastic book called Breaking the Age Code, which is exactly all about this.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So many gems here. Thank you for that, because that is huge. It's really that you can actually, your attitude can act as a buffer, right?
Yeah. I mean, the mind-body connection, we know that it's real for a million reasons. Look at the effect of meditation, for example. It's demonstrable.
So we are getting so many shout outs here. I'm 55 and love it. I feel good at 61. Another person, I'm comfortable in my 52, smiley face. Somebody that Marty Constant, this discussion about ageism is powerful because two powerful women, me and Ashton Applegate. Yes, let's end it one discussion at a time. And this one, which is important too, from Barbara. Generally, no issue with my age, but when you are in career transitioning, you think about it more, especially when interviewing senior level people that are 20 years younger with you, with not a ton of work experience.
Absolutely. So, I mean, in the workforce, age discrimination is very real. It's not legal, but it happens, and sometimes people say, well, what do you think about like fudging my resume, fudging my age? It's of course not legal to ask someone what year they graduated from high school or whatever, but if recruiters do still do it. And the bottom line is, this stuff is complicated. You need to handle it in your own way. If that's the way for you to get a job so you can pay your rent, no judgment on any of this. But those behaviors, lying about our age, concealing early accomplishments, aren't good for us because they're rooted in shame about something that shouldn't be shameful. And in the case of, professional accomplishments, should be the opposite, a source of pride and of the complex identity that you have accumulated over years of being in the world and doing whatever it is that you do. And of course, when we hide or cover it up from a sort of larger structural point of view, we give a pass to the discrimination that makes those behaviors useful. So until more and more of us have those conversations that Marty's talking about, whether in public or with your, neighbor when she gives you a, horribly ageist birthday card, it's only when we speak about it in a gentle and non-judgmental way that we move the lever. But every single conversation moves the needle a little bit.
Exactly. And, you're really tapping into a very salient and touchy, tricky subject, right? Because a lot of people that are
It's
watching
complicated.
are in career transition, and
Yeah.
they are challenged with what to do with the age ranges, whether it be on their LinkedIn profile, on their resume, certainly in interviews. I mean, listen, if I show up in an interview tomorrow, nobody thinks that I'm in my 20s, 30s, or 40s. I mean, it's pretty much implied. So I'm curious how someone who is in this process, here I am, candidate at large, goes through this process without feeling shame, but also knowing what the realities are within the marketplace. How do we do this so we are honoring ourselves and also not putting ourselves, at risk of this kind of judgment or the last acceptable prejudice, as you've referenced?
I mean, ideally, we do it by claiming our age. I'm not out there looking for work because I'm self-employed. So I am not going to say, you have to say how old you are and seize the bull by the horns. Again, if you need that job, you should pursue whatever strategy you think is most likely to get you that job. I mean, I think it often is good to name the thing, which the recruiter legally cannot do, and say, you might be concerned that I, would be uncomfortable if my manager is much younger than me. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that men were saying, oh, I could never report to a woman. Well, guess what? That changed. And we older people do need to stay current. We do need to, if we want to be in the workforce on those terms, and some people can afford not to be or don't want to be. But, as long as we hide or deny our age, it's not good for us. And so, and it's
perpetuating the cycle.
We are, we are complicit in our own marginalization. Again, no judgment if that's what you got to do. But it's why I do the work I do, is to help people hopefully see that if we join forces, and the best analogy, is the women's movement, and say, no, actually, we're, the issue is structural. The problem is not my age. The problem is discrimination on the basis of my age, and call out, always zoom out to the larger forces, then gradually we change the culture. We are not going to achieve equity in the workplace or anywhere else without confronting ageism in the culture at large, just like we're not going to, make equal opportunities for Black and brown people in America without confronting the history of structural racism in this country. You've got to go deep to make lasting, meaningful change. And that's going to take all of us. It's a grassroots movement. It takes a million voices. So whatever, pursue it in whatever way and at whatever speed.
Yes,
you want.
I think that there's, this is clearly, not an overnight matter. I think that
culture change is slow.
Culture change is slow. And so I think that the two parts of this conversation both equal is, if you are comfortable owning your age and doing that, the responsibility is also that you need to stay current with what it takes from a skill set level
Absolutely.
to be able to perform the job. So,
Absolutely.
So I think that, there's a lot of times I'm talking to clients and people will say, well, I'm rejected because, there's age discrimination, or, there's ageism. And that's, I'm not saying that that's not true, but part of what helps to make you a valuable candidate, regardless of your age, is making sure that you are staying current, both with your skill set and experience and technology and all of those things that are required. So
absolutely,
you can't just use it
as an excuse.
As an excuse.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's real. I have no doubt when people report this that it is their experience.
yes.
But I mean, I see Michael's comment there, aging is scary during your career pursuits, especially when you haven't achieved anything. That's true, but it is fairer to be judged on your accomplishments than it is on your appearance. And it brings to mind an important point about ageism, which is that it is any judgment on the basis of age, including you're too young. What could you possibly know? And it also hampers, ideally, there's a famous experiment done by an orchestra in Europe that was, made up mostly, shocker, of white men. And they wanted to diversify, and they conducted auditions behind a curtain. And the minute the people who were choosing who got to join the orchestra couldn't see the person, they put a carpet down so you couldn't hear how much the person weighed or what kind of shoes they were wearing. And then, even though consciously they wanted a more diverse group, your unconscious bias kicks in. It couldn't operate if they couldn't see the person, and that diversified. So, you want to challenge if you're in HR, we know HR people say, they study this. They say our older job candidates do a fantastic job, and yet they acknowledge that they are reluctant to hire them. That is maddening. And if it is keeping you from, finding or holding on to a job, it's enraging. But from my point of view, what I urge you to do is to join this movement. I want to mention a website, the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse, oldschool.info, which has hundreds. Yeah, if someone would put that in the chat, that would be great. Hundreds of free anti-ageism, resources to educate yourself about what ageism is, about language, about stereotypes, about there's movies, there's graphics, all sorts of stuff, the tool that you need that suits you. I'd love to address a comment in the chat. Can I do that, Lauren?
Please, go for it.
So
Please.
Kevin says, I'm feeling younger every minute now. I am delighted that the conversation is making you feel good, but respectfully, I submit that you are not feeling younger. You can, what is the actual feeling? Because we can only be the age we are. We can't be younger. And when we aspire to youth as the goal, that is the cornerstone of ageism, this assumption that younger equals better. So I submit that you are feeling more optimistic,
or energized,
or more cheerful, or energized, or that you're smarter, you learned something. So I think a habit to break, and please, I hope, Kevin, you don't feel I'm jumping on you.
No. Kevin's cool. Kevin's
okay,
cool.
Good. But this is a habit. We all have this, but a habit to try and break is the habit of using younger, the word younger, to mean insert positive thing, or right. I feel old. What that means? I feel slow. Exhausted. I feel useless. It's never about age. Someone else your age feels the opposite or feels completely differently. So use the word that describes how you actually feel rather than old or young as a placeholder, because that reinforces this idea that young is good and old is bad.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you did that, because you just created the perfect segue for the next area. Okay, so here we go, right? Here we know in the world, right, that there are all kinds of, I guess you could call them slurs, right? Oh, the digital natives, we need to, we're looking for a strong culture fit. So we're looking for people who are tech savvy and go-getters and high energy. So what do we do when we find job descriptions or conversations that are masking some of these terms as a way to point to people who are of a certain generation or of a certain age? Because yes, of course, we could go file a claim with the EEOC, but let's be honest. How's that going to help you when you're in the middle of a search? Or if you're in the middle of a current role, how do you handle that and protect yourself?
Well, it is a push-pull. And again, I am not in a position, and I wouldn't want, I'm not hiring you or firing you. And even if I were, I couldn't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I mean, one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was writing my book was don't use the word should. But the fact is, that it is not legal. That language is not legal. Tech companies like Facebook lost a big suit for allowing advertisements. I believe they were job listings to be screened by age of the, to be targeted to
Right.
Facebook.
Zuckerberg said that younger people are just smarter.
Yeah, well, he hasn't said that lately,
Yeah,
because he's not so young anymore. But yes, it's maddening. So it is not legal. And what I want you to do, which you may or may not have the temperament to do or be in the position to do, is call it out. That is one of the things that social media is super handy for. LinkedIn. I have a blog called Yo, Is This Ageist? Send it to me.
Is this ageist?
Yeah. Put it, I'll tweet it. You tweet it, call out the behavior, because it is not legal and it is wrong. And and public accountability is a very, very effective tool.
So, there is so much activity that is being discussed with the hiring process at large. I mean, people talk about the hiring process, the good, the bad, the ugly, the in-between, people who do it well, and people who, whether it's ghosting or 1,000 other things. So this is something that needs, I'm going to say needs, for all of us, right, needs to be addressed. If you are going through this, don't sit quietly in a corner and then go, oh well. Take some action and call it out, because there are lots and lots of ways that this is secretly hiding, kind of insidiously embedded into our culture. One of the things that you talk about in your Yo blog, which I love, is how the whole cosmetic industry, anti-aging products, the aspiration to look younger and younger, not to mention the whole plastic surgery area, dyeing your hair, not dyeing your hair. So I know that this may not sound like a career question, but let's face it, we're on Zoom all day long. Yeah. We're on Zoom all day long, or in the office, or whatever it is. So give us some.
And it is very gendered. Women do. There's a study, that shows that women feel more pressured to dye their hair in order explicitly to look young. And I early on, I used to be a little more preachy about this. I've learned. And a woman came up to me and she said, "You don't get it. If I didn't dye my hair, I would lose my job, and I've got children to support." So, and women, there are women who have Botox or whatever because it makes them feel good and it makes them feel powerful or whatever that thing. No judgment. But those strategies are expensive. So they're not available to everyone. So it reinforces, inequality. And sooner or later, those strategies fail us. You can look healthy. You can look as good as possible. You can look chic. Hopefully you can look rested. That's a big one. But, you sooner or later are not going to look young. And if that is your goal, it is a destructive one. I mean, I think it's actually, these are strong words, but it is rooted in self-loathing. All prejudice requires an othering, seeing a group as other than ourselves, other religion, other sports team, whatever, other country. The weird thing about ageism is the other is our own future older selves. Ageism is rooted in denial that we are aging, which everyone who wakes up in the morning is doing, and being, dreading your future. And listen, there are those mornings where I look in the mirror and just like everyone else, I go, what the hell happened? But so it's human. But on the other hand, to not see that as a failure and to understand that this is a road we are all on is a lot better than, but these are habits of thinking, that our habits are, bias is deeply ingrained habit, and changing how we think, especially when it comes to values, is not easy, but it is like letting a genie out of the bottle. Once you see your own attitudes, that's where it starts, is look at your own attitudes towards age and aging. And the habit of how you use the words old and young is a really good sort of indicator. Then, and that's not fun. It's uncomfortable. No one likes to acknowledge that they're biased. But once you see it in yourself, then you start to see it around you, in advertisings, in job, in the media, in the greeting card aisle, wherever. And that is actually liberating. because you're like, oh, it's not my failure. It's not my bad. It is being reinforced by systems that profit from this and want me to feel terrible about myself. I mean, think about the body acceptance movement, right? We have a lot we could learn from that, and want me to spend money on things that won't help me, want me to set myself apart from other people, like who looks better, who's doing this better. All those behaviors are self-destructive and destructive to the communities we live in.
Absolutely. And so this is a phrase that I'm curious what a smart and reframing response might look like. You look great for your age.
That is the only snappy answer I've come up with in 15 years is, you look great for your age too. Said without the snark, but let the uncomfortable silence sit there. I mean, a really good all-purpose response to an ageist comment is, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to, you need to think, what's your intention? Do you want to shame them or catch them out? Or do you want to try
to gotcha, right?
Yeah. And no one likes to be, I mean, often people are like, oh, I meant it as a compliment. Okay. But why doesn't it doesn't feel like a compliment, does it really? Or what makes you think it's a compliment? Like, dig down, because it is in that discomfort. Culture change does not happen without discomfort. Right. And it does take courage to say something rather than, it's hard to break the habit of, oh, gee, thanks. But we can only accept that compliment at the expense of everyone else our age who doesn't happen to look quite as good as we do. And that's icky, and as women, especially, always measuring each other by appearance, that's corrosive. So if we can break those habits, it's better for us and better for the world we inhabit.
Completely. Because this, of course, happens on the other end of the spectrum, right? Oh, you look like such a baby.
Yeah.
Or, and
how are you, young lady? Right. I should say, my website is thischairrocks.com. I have a blog. The book is not free, but I've been thinking out loud in blog form since 2005. And the post I just put up yesterday, I run the occasional guest post, and it's a really good post by another journalist named Phil Moeller about how to respond to an ageist comment, because it's a question I get so often. But when we are quiet, we collaborate.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, This Chair Rocks. I'm going to put, after this, I will make sure in the comments.
This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. Don't forget the second half of the title. Not a book about chairs. That's my own fault for giving it that title.
Oh, I also will put in the Amazon link. A manifesto against
ageism. Thanks.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot more good books on the subject than there used to be. And again, if you go to oldschool.info, it's all in one place. It's one-stop shopping, except everything is free except the books, to find the book that suits you, the report that suits you, a graphic. There's tons of short videos. There's long and wonky webinars. There's stuff about the workplace. There's stuff for women. There's stuff for teachers. So go there and look around, and you don't have to search the internet.
Thank you. So we're about to close this blast, and I wanted to ask you, Ashton, so, you're not going to be around forever, and I'm not either.
That's for sure.
Right? And so in the remaining time that you have on this planet, what is your wish as far as the manifesto and as far as moving the needle with respect to what is the ultimate goal with respect to how we approach ageism? What would be success for you when you're done?
That the end goal, the world I want to live in, is a world in which every human being, regardless of age, regardless of what they look like, regardless of where they're from, regardless of how long they've lived there, is looked at as a human being and we appreciate them and learn about them on the basis of that, rather than coming to all these judgments, and rather than people having to face layers of discrimination based on whether they're poor, whether they're fat, whether they're old, whether they're Black, all those things. And we can't get rid of ageism without tackling racism and sexism and homophobia, because all these are structures that reinforce and compound each other. I don't think we're going to live in that rainbow kumbaya universe. Let's say I make it to 90. I don't think that's 20 years from now, but I do see change. I think more and more people are aware of intersectionality, of this idea that these forms of oppression all inform each other. So my goal is just to advance that. My near-term goal is to make the movement against ageism more relevant to people who are not white, middle-class women like you and me. And to do that, we need to ally with other social justice movements and help them advance their goals. It's not zero sum. If we make the world less sexist, we make it a better world for women to grow old in. And the inverse is true also. If we make the world a better place to grow old in, it's a lot better place to have a disability or to be a person of color. So I think there's this assumption, sort of, I can only work on one thing, and if I do this other thing, it's going to take away. It's the opposite of zero sum. When we chip away at any form of prejudice, we chip away at the fear and ignorance that underlie them all.
This is perfect, right? So it's interlocking. It's not like you have to just break off this one piece, right? They work interdependently, which means that you take a piece of this and advance the conversation, even by just saying,
what do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that? So that we remove some of the preconceived notions and the prejudice. We have a lot of comments. Niatu, oh my goodness, one of my favorites. Stephen Elliott, thank you. I find it odd to listen to people who look as if they are in the prime of life, apparently in their late 40s, talking about ageism.
It's great that they're talking about ageism. Exactly. Everyone needs to talk about ageism. Hopefully they're talking about the advantages that they enjoy, that they see their older colleagues and maybe their younger colleagues not enjoying. So the more people talk about this, the better.
The better. Let's bring it out. I think we need to be comfortable with having these conversations and be open to listening to each other. There we go. There we go. And then this one by Mary Day, a fun response to ageism, agefriendlyvibes.com.
Really nice cards.
And a lot of these, the ageism is often covert. Hell yeah. So lots and lots and lots of great comments here, but it's good to hear the issues surfaced and discussed. There you go, Stephen.
Yeah, demystifies them and sort of destigmatizes the whole thing. Because the more you learn about aging, the less fear it holds, which may seem counterintuitive, but it's, to put the not, a realistic and slightly not cynical spin on it, but it's because we are brainwashed, all of us, to think it's all going to suck. So when you'll come out of your foxhole and you look around, the more we learn about what is actually involved, the better it looks. And I think if we look at all the older people around us, we see so many different ways to be in the world and to have meaning in whatever form it takes. You don't need to want to start a social movement and change the world. Any goal, however small, is fine.
Thank you so much, Ashton, for coming on LinkedIn Live. This is your first time, so I feel especially honored that you were willing to do this here today. Lots of great comments, and please go check out her blog. I will include all those links in the comments, and of course, her book, This Chair Rocks, and also previous podcasts. But let's change that conversation one at a time. Exactly. And please don't be afraid to come and bring it out into conversations, whether it's in career, in a neutral way, without having it be inciting. Have it be part of a regular conversation so that it doesn't hold you back and run the risk of those self-loathing feelings underneath it, that shame.
Thanks for showing up, everyone. Thanks for the great comments.
Showing up. And Ashton, hang out in the studio for 1 minute, and I will see you all next week with a great guest. Bye-bye.